My son took my company and laughed. His lawyer watched. 6 weeks later, I pressed play on a recording. Most men lose a business to a bad market. I lost mine to my own son across a walnut table in a room full of strangers. He smiled while he did it, but I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Walter Boyd. I'm 63 years old. I've run Boyd Mechanical on Webster Street in Dayton, Ohio for 31 years. Heating, cooling, pipe, cold hands, and hot attics. I still make my coffee at 5:43 every morning. I still drive the same gray Ford with 211,000 miles on it. Nobody who passed me at a gas station would guess what I owned. That was the point. Welcome to this channel. Get comfortable and keep one thing in mind while you listen. Every person in this story had a chance to do the right thing. They simply chose not to. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this one ends. Now, it started with a folder, a plain manila folder, the kind you buy 100 of. My son set it on my kitchen table on a Tuesday morning and told me it was nothing. Let me tell you what I built first, so you understand what he took. I started Boyd Mechanical on June 6, 1993, out of the bed of a borrowed truck. I had $400 and a set of used tools. Ruth kept the books at the kitchen table. We had 2 kids. Preston came first. Renee came 3 years later. I worked 80-hour weeks for 19 of those years. I missed ball games. I missed a lot. I told myself I was building something they could stand on. Ruth got sick in the winter of 2021. Ovarian cancer. Stage 3 by the time they found it. She was gone by November 3rd, 2021. I sat with her the last night in room 214 at St. Elizabeth. She held my hand at 2:07 in the morning and made me promise. Keep them together. She said, keep the family whole. I promised her I would. I have thought about that promise every single day since. There's one more thing you need to know about me. I record everything. Back in 1994, a supply man named Gerald Foss shook my hand on a price and then billed me double. Cost me $1,100 I didn't have. I never forgot it. So for 30 years, I've kept a little recorder running in my shirt pocket on every job walk, every bid, every handshake. My guys tease me about it. Old Walt and his tape. It's just a habit now. A reflex. I press the button and I forget it's on. Remember that. It matters later. Preston grew up sharp and restless. He wanted the corner office without the ladder. He married a woman named Sloan in 2019, and Sloan wanted a life that looked good in photographs. Big house, right neighborhood, the kind of kitchen you don't cook in. I liked her fine at first. I told myself she was just young. Renee stayed close to the work. She apprenticed summers. She could size a duck run at 16. But after Ruth passed, Preston and Sloan pushed her to the edges, cut her out of meetings, talked over her at dinners. I told myself it was grief. I told myself it would pass. It didn't. The first insult was small. I almost didn't count it. It was a Sunday dinner, September of last year. I mentioned I might expand into commercial work. Preston laughed into his water glass. He said, "Easy now, Dad. Let the young guys handle strategy. You stick to the wrenches." Everyone chuckled. I chuckled too. He'd had a long week. I figured. I let it go. The second one stung more. In October, the county gave Boyd Mechanical an award. 30 years in business. They took a photo for the paper. When the photographer lined us up, Preston stepped to the center, put Sloan on his arm, and eased me to the far edge of the frame. I ended up half cropped out. My own company. My own name on the truck. I looked at that clipping for a long time. Then I put it in a drawer and said nothing. The third was money. In December, Preston came to me at the shop. He said the company needed to modernize. New software, new fleet, a rebrand. He said the banks wanted a personal signature to open a working line of credit. He said it was routine, just paperwork. I trusted my son. So I signed a signature card at 3rd Street Bank on December 19th. And I didn't read every line. Because who reads every line when it's your own boy sliding the pen across the table? I should have. God help me, I should have. The fourth one is the one I'll never forgive myself for excusing. It was a vendor banquet in February at the Presidential Ballroom on 2nd Street. 300 people from the trade. Men I'd known 30 years. Preston got up to accept a partnership plaque on behalf of Boyd Mechanical. And in front of all of them, he thanked the new generation for dragging a tired old company into the modern age. He said his father meant well, but the world had moved on. People laughed. Politely. The way you laugh when you're embarrassed for someone. I sat there in my good suit, and I smiled like it didn't land. It landed. It landed like a hammer. I drove home that night and sat in the driveway on Culp Lane for 19 minutes with the engine off. I told myself he was ambitious. I told myself ambition looks ugly up close. That's what a father does. He builds excuses for his son the way he once built cribs. But what I didn't know yet was that the paperwork had already started moving. Under the table, in the dark, the betrayal came into the daylight on a Thursday. April 3rd. Preston asked me to come to the fourth-floor conference room at the law office of Kettering and Voss on Ludlow Street downtown. He said it was a quarterly review. Bring nothing, he said, just yourself. I got there at 8:47 in the morning. The room had a long walnut table and a view of the river. Preston was there in a suit that cost more than my first truck. Sloan sat beside him in gray. And there was a lawyer named Garrison Kettering, 58, tan, silver at the temples, the kind of man who smiles with the bottom half of his face only. There was a fourth man, too, a rep from a company called Hargrove Holdings, a regional outfit that had been buying up trade businesses across 3 states. I sat down. Nobody offered me coffee. Preston slid a thick document across the table, a purchase agreement. I read the first page twice. Boyd Mechanical LLC, to be acquired by Hargrove Holdings for $4,275,000, effective on close. My hands went cold. I said, "What is this?" Preston said it was a future. He said the offer was generous and the deal was done. He said the members had already approved it. I said, "What members?" "I own this company." And that's when he leaned back and he smiled. Not a nervous smile, not a sun smile. The smile of a man who'd rehearsed a moment in the mirror. He said, "No, Dad, you signed it over back in December. Restructured the ownership into the operating entity. Sloan and I hold a controlling interest now." I said the room was moving. Wasn't. It was just me. I said, "I signed a credit line, a signature card." He tapped the folder. He said the document said otherwise. He said maybe I should read things before I sign them. And then he said the sentence, the one I'll hear in my head until the day I die. He looked at Garrison Kettering, then back at me, and he said out loud in front of all of them, "You signed it yourself, old man. Nobody made you." The Hargrove rep looked at his shoes. Sloan looked at her nails. And Garrison Kettering slid a pen toward me and said there were a few remaining consents that would make the transition cleaner, and that it was in everyone's interest to be reasonable. I didn't take the pen. I stood up. My knees didn't want to hold me, but they did. I said I needed to think. Preston said, "Take all the time you want, but the close is set for the end of the month, and it's happening with or without your signature." He was still smiling. I walked out. I found the elevator. I don't remember the drive. That was the last ordinary Thursday of my life. I ended up in the parking lot of a diner called Amber's on Wayne Avenue. It's where Ruth and I used to go on Sunday mornings before the kids woke up. I sat in the truck. I didn't go in. It was 11:47 in the morning, and the lot was mostly empty, and I just went still. I want to tell you, I cried. I didn't. Something worse happens when you're my age. You go quiet all the way down. You start counting. I counted the years. 31. I counted the mornings I'd left before sunup. I counted the ball games I'd missed to make payroll for a company my own son had just handed to strangers over a walnut table. I thought about Ruth in room 214. Keep them together, she'd said, and I promised. And now our boy had taken the thing I built and used it to break the family in half. I had failed her in the one thing she asked. That was the part that hollowed me out. Not the money, the promise. I sat there until 2:23 in the afternoon. A waitress knocked on my window twice to ask if I was all right. I said I was fine. I wasn't. I drove home to the empty house on Culp Lane, and I sat in Ruth's chair, and I didn't turn on a single light. My phone buzzed at 9:06 that night. A text from Preston. It said, "Don't make this hard, Dad. Take the payout. Enjoy your retirement." He'd already spent me in his mind. I was already a check. I didn't answer. Silence has always been the loudest thing I own. The turn came 4 days later, and it came from a man with grease under his fingernails. Dave Pruitt has been my shop foreman for 31 years, same as the company. He was the first man I ever hired. He knew about the sale by then. Word travels fast in his shop. He came out to house on a Monday evening with a six-pack. He knew I wouldn't drink, because that's the kind of thing Dave does. We sat on the back porch a while, not talking. Then he said something that changed everything. He said, "Walt, You always run that recorder. Every meeting, 30 years. You even had it go in the morning. The kid brought those papers by the shop, remember? Back before Christmas. Early. You were bidding the Vandalia job that day. I went completely still because he was right. December 17th, 7:19 in the morning. Preston had come to the shop before I left for the Vandalia bid. He'd brought the folder. He'd sat on the corner of my desk and walked me through what he wanted me to sign. And my recorder had been running in my shirt pocket, like it always is, like it had been for 30 years, because I pressed the button and I forget. I didn't say anything to Dave. I couldn't. I just reached over and gripped his shoulder, and he nodded like he understood, because he did. I went inside. I found the recorder in the truck console where it lives. I scrolled back through the files. There were dozens, job walks, bids, and there it was, December 17th, 7:19 a.m., 19 minutes long. I sat at the kitchen table, and I pressed play, and I listened to my son tell me a lie in his own voice. On the recording, Preston tells me it's just a credit authorization. He says the bank needs it to open the working line. He says, and I remember every word now, he says, it's just a credit paper, Dad. Nothing changes. The company's still yours. I'd never take that from you. Those were his words. Recorded, time-stamped, clear as glass. He had no idea it existed. I pressed stop. I sat in the dark kitchen for a long while. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something colder and steadier than that. I felt awake. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls before 8:14. The first was to Delia Marsh. Delia Marsh is an attorney on Main Street. 59, plain spoken, reads a contract the way a mechanic listens to an engine. She'd done Ruth's estate. She'd done something else, too, back in the summer of 2022, that Preston had forgotten about, because Preston never asked, and I never told. See, after Ruth died, Delia sat me down and made me get my affairs in order. On August 22nd, 2022, we did 3 things. We put the building on Webster Street, the land under the whole operation, into a revocable trust in my name, not the company's name, mine. And we rewrote the operating agreement for Boyd Mechanical LLC so that no sale of company assets could close without the written consent of the founding member, me. And we had all of it notarized and filed, dated, stamped, sealed. Preston's beautiful purchase agreement sold a company that didn't own the ground it stood on, and it couldn't close without the signature of the one man he'd just humiliated. I sat across from Delia and slid the recorder and the trust folder across her desk. She listened to the 719 file with her hands folded. When it ended, she took off her glasses. She said, "Walter, do you understand what you're holding?" I said I was beginning to. She said the recording alone made the December signature voidable for fraud in the inducement. She said the trust and the operating agreement made the sale impossible without me. She said, in her words, they built a house on land they don't own, and they forgot to check the deed. I asked her what I should do. She said the smart thing. She said, let them keep running. Let them think they've won. Let them get all the way to the closing table with their buyer in the room, and then we tell the truth, all at once, where everyone can see it. So that's what we did. For the next 7 weeks, I disappeared. I stopped answering Preston's texts, then answered one softly to keep him calm. I said I was tired, and I'd probably take the payout. I let my voice sound old and beaten. It wasn't hard. Half of it was true. Preston relaxed. Sloan relaxed. They started spending money they didn't have yet. I heard from Dave that they put earnest money down on a house in Oakwood, a place with columns. Sloan posted a photo of a champagne flute captioned new chapter. Meanwhile, Delia and I worked quietly. We pulled the recorded file and had it authenticated by a forensic tech named Marcus, who confirmed the timestamp and the metadata and swore it in an affidavit. We pulled the certified copy of the trust from the county recorder. We pulled the notarized operating agreement, the one with the founding member consent clause. We pulled the December signature card from 3rd Street Bank and matched it against what Preston had actually filed and found he'd used a signature meant for a credit line, the paper a transfer of interest. Every document lined up in a folder 2 inches thick. I didn't rush. I've poured a lot of concrete in my life. You don't rush concrete. You let it cure. The closing was set for October 29th at 10 o'clock in the morning in that same 4th-floor conference room on Ludlow Street, Garrison Kettering's office. Preston made sure I was invited because he still needed my consent signature, and he still believed I'd fold for the $4 million. He texted me the night before. It said, "Tomorrow we all move forward. Be there. Be smart." I was there. I was smart. Just not the way he meant. I want to tell you about that room because I'll remember it the rest of my life. It was 9:57 when I walked in. The long walnut table was full. Garrison Kettering at the head, tan and easy. 2 lawyers from Hargrove Holding. A closing agent with a stack of papers. A notary named Colette with her stamp already out. A banker from the acquisition side. And Preston and Sloan side by side in their best clothes, looking like the cover of a magazine that doesn't exist. Preston smirked when he saw me. He actually smirked. He said, "Glad you came around, Dad. Sit." He gestured to a chair at the far end, the way you'd seat a child. I didn't sit at the far end. I sat next to the empty chair beside me. Then Delia Marsh walked in and took it and set a plain folder on the table, and the room got quiet. Kettering asked, with that half smile, who Delia was. Delia introduced herself as counsel for the founding member of Boyd Mechanical and for the Walter Boyd Revocable Trust. I watched the word trust land on Preston's face. He didn't know what it meant yet. He would. Delia spoke first. She was calm, almost gentle. She said before anyone signed anything, there were 2 matters of record the parties would want to be aware of in the interest of not committing fraud on the county. She let that last word sit there. She opened the folder. She took out the first document. It was heavy stock, blue-backed with a raised seal. She said this was a certified copy of a revocable trust dated August 22nd, 2022, placing the real property at that address, the building and the land, in the name of Walter Boyd, individually, not the company. She slid it to the Hargrove lawyer. She said, "The entity you are buying does not own its premises. It never has. Not since before any of the December paperwork existed." The Hargrove lawyers leaned into each other and started whispering. The banker picked up the trust and read the date twice. Preston's smile went first. That's how it starts. The smile goes before the person knows it's gone. He said something about a mistake. He said there had to be an explanation. His voice was still loud, still confident. That comes next. Too loud, right before too quiet. Delia took out the second document, the operating agreement, notarized, dated 2022. She read one clause aloud. "No sale or transfer of company assets shall be effective without the written consent of the founding member." She looked up. She said, "My client has not consented. My client will not consent. There is no deal to close." That's when the color left Preston's face. I watched it go, from the top down, like water draining out of a glass. Garrison Kettering, to his credit, was still trying. He said the December instrument transferred controlling interest, and controlling interest could compel the sale. He said it smoothly. He clearly built the whole thing on that one signature. And that was my moment, not to shout, not to gloat, just to set a small black recorder on the walnut table and press one button. The room heard my son's voice. Clear, time-stamped, December 17th, 7:19 in the morning. "It's just the credit paper, Dad. Nothing changes. The company's still yours. I'd never take that from you." 19 seconds. That's all I played. Then I pressed stop. Nobody moved. The notary's stamp hung in the air over the pad. The Hargrove lawyer closed his portfolio very slowly, the way you close a door in a house where someone has just died. And here's the part I'll never forget. Preston's hands started to shake. This grown man in his expensive suit, his hands were shaking on the walnut table, and he couldn't stop them. His voice, when it came, was too quiet now. He said, "Dad." He said, "You were recording me, in our shop, like I was a stranger." I looked at him. I let the silence stretch. 6 full seconds. Then I said the only thing I had to say. I said it low, without heat. "You told me the company was still mine. On the record, son, I just believed you." He looked around the table for someone to help him. He looked at Kettering, who was suddenly very busy stacking papers. He looked at the Hargrove men, who were already standing. He looked at Sloan, and Sloan wouldn't meet his eyes. That was the last thing. When even Sloan looked away, Preston Boyd understood exactly what he'd lost. Delia said one flat sentence, and then we were done. She said the acquisition is dead, the December transfer is void for fraud, and Boyd Mechanical belongs in full to Walter Boyd. Then she closed her folder. It made a small, quiet sound, the loudest sound in the room. I stood up. I put the recorder back in my shirt pocket, where it lives, and I walked out of the 4th-floor conference room on Ludlow Street, the same way I'd walked in 7 weeks earlier. Slow, quiet, old, if you like, But this time I own every board of the floor under my feet. Let me tell you what happened after, because the after is what matters. Hargrove Holdings walked away inside the hour. They don't buy companies with clouded title and criminal exposure attached. Their letter withdrawing the offer arrived 4 days later. Preston had spent months in legal fees chasing $4,275,000, and he ended with nothing but a bill from Garrison Kettering. The earnest money on the house in Oakwood, the one with the columns, they lost that too. $19,000 gone. The champagne photo came down off the internet. The new chapter closed before it opened. I did not press criminal charges. People asked me why. Delia wanted to. She said the fraud was clean and provable. But Ruth's voice was in my ear the whole time. Keep them together. So I made a different choice. I told Preston, through Delia, that I would not go to the police, and I would not sue him personally on 3 conditions. He would resign from Boyd Mechanical. He would sign a statement admitting the December documents were fraudulent for the file, and he would leave his sister alone for the rest of his natural life. He signed. His hand was still shaking. I heard. That statement sits in a folder in Delia's office to this day. Insurance. A man learns to keep insurance. Sloan left him by summer. Turns out the marriage was built on the same thing the sale was. Appearances and money that wasn't there. When the money went, so did she. I won't pretend that made me sad. I'll only say I understood it. And Preston? He got a job. A real one. For the first time in his life, selling equipment for a competitor 2 counties over. Dave saw him at a trade show in June. Said he looked older. Said he looked like a man who finally understood the way of the thing after he'd already dropped it. I don't hate my son. I want you to hear that. I grieve him. That's different. And it's worse. Now the good part. The part that closed the wound. Renee came back. My daughter, who'd been pushed to the edges of every photo and every dinner, who'd walked away rather than fight her brother for scraps. I called her the night after the closing. First time in a year we really talked. I told her everything. The recorder, the trust, the 719 file. She was quiet a long time. Then she said, Mom told you to keep us together. And you did, Dad. Just not the way she meant. Renee runs Boyd Mechanical now. Started in the field, the same as I did, then the office. She sized a commercial job last month that Preston never had the patience to learn. On her first day, she found that clipping in my desk drawer, the award photo where I'd been cropped to the edge. She had it reprinted, the full frame this time. It hangs by the door on Webster Street. All of us in it, even the empty space where Ruth should be. Dave Pruitt is still my foreman, 32 years now. On his birthday in August, I signed over a small ownership stake in the company, 5% real and notarized and filed, because a man who reminds you that you recorded your own salvation deserves a piece of what he saved. He argued with me about it for 9 minutes. Then he shook my hand the old way. No paperwork needed between us. We had 30 years of that. And me, I still make my coffee at 5:43. I still drive the gray Ford. On Sunday mornings, I go to Amber's on Wayne Avenue, and I sit in the booth, Ruth, and I use a share, and I order the same thing she did. It costs $12.97 with the coffee. I leave a good tip. I'm not counting years anymore. I'm just having breakfast. I do it again. Every quiet minute of it. Not for revenge. Revenge is a cold meal, and it never fills you the way you think it will. I didn't do it to ruin my son. I did it to keep a promise I made to a dying woman in room 214 at 2 a.m. She asked me to hold the family together, and holding it together, it turned out, meant refusing to let one child sell out from under the rest of us. Sometimes love has to be strong enough to say no. Sometimes the kindest thing a father can do is not fold. So let me ask you something. Have you ever been underestimated by the very people who should have known you best? Has someone ever looked at your old truck, your plain clothes, your quiet way, and decided you were finished? What would you have done if the voice on the recording had been your own child? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story reached a place in you that you weren't expecting, share it with someone who's been overlooked, someone who got moved to the edge of the photo, someone who was called old or slow or finished by the very people who should have seen them clearest of all. Subscribe so you never miss another story. I'll see you in the next one.